Hello, and welcome to Just Nation, a show about faith, racial justice, and how these issues impact all Philadelphians, but specifically Black Philadelphians. Once again, I'm your host, Nia Holston, and I'm missing my co-host here today, Reverend Holston, who had a prior commitment and was not able to make it. But I'm so excited about this month's show. I really think this is a really timely topic, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while. So I'm really, really excited to be joined by our guests today to talk about hyper-masculinity in Black online spaces. Now, when we get into this conversation, I think it's important to note that we're not saying that there is an issue that is specific or unique to Black men. We are not going to be denigrating Black men in this conversation, but really it's just an opportunity to have a discussion amongst people about some of the things that we're seeing and how it affects relationships between Black men and Black women, particularly on social media and the rise of podcasting, and how it affects our relationships overall. So I'm really, really excited to be joined by our guests today, all of whom are friends of mine, but one of whom in particular is my best friend. This is my husband, Michael, who will join us today. And so, Michael, do you want to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your interest in this topic?
Okay. I'll start off with where I'm from. I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens. Moved out to Philadelphia because of my wife here. My interest in this topic is I spend a lot of time online. I'm also, I guess, a Black man, and I'm trying to understand where we're going as a group of people in this nation, on this planet. There's a lot of different voices that are influencing the younger generation, even my generation, and I spend a lot of time trying to analyze and understand what's going on. And I have a lot of younger, I would say, friends that are influenced by just interesting people. And so I try my best to really just understand and analyze. So that's my interest in this topic.
And when you say you're online a lot, is that because generally you're interested in tech or generally you're interested in social media? Why are you online a lot?
To elaborate, I guess, a little bit more, I like to go on YouTube and I like to learn about different topics. And I'm always trying to learn what's going on, what is the latest meme, what is the latest trend that affects people like me, or just in general, what's going on. And so that's what I mean by going online a lot. I'm on YouTube probably way more than I should be.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
great. And so I would next like to introduce another friend of mine, Mr. Samson Adeyemi. Can you introduce yourself? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Samson Adeyemi. A little background on myself. I was born in London, moved here about when I was 9 years old. Definitely was a big culture shock to come to the United States. It was very, very different. I'm also formerly incarcerated, and now I am a software engineer. And I think one of the interesting parts of this topic is that being from like just these different places and journeys of my life, I feel as though like this is a super important conversation in the way that we just think, in the way that we process things, in the way that we try to validate or prove our worthiness to society. So I think this is a very important topic.
Yes, definitely. And my next guest, another friend of mine, Mr. Anton Robinson. Can you introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm Anton Robinson. I am a criminal defense attorney as well as a professor in the Philadelphia area. I think as important is where I come from, where I came from, which happened to be from the South, the Deep South area right outside of Tallahassee, Florida, close to the Florida-Georgia line, colored the way that I see the world, and certainly as an adult having an opportunity to see many spaces in the United States, seeing that some of the same ills can exist in many different settings and in different places. So I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to sharing the stage with you all and having a really good conversation.
All right, great, thank you. And so just as an introduction to the topic, I've been concerned about what I've been seeing, not just in Black online spaces, but in online spaces generally. I will say with the rise of social media, and the particularized social media that we're seeing right now, which sort of has people chronically online, TikTok, Instagram, podcasting. There has been a concurrent rise in who is deemed to be an authority on a particular subject. And particularly, I will say, I see a lot of relationship experts that are not necessarily providing any qualifications for the subjects, and are causing discord between relationships between Black men and Black women. And particularly, I see a lot of backlash to some of the gains of the feminist and the womanist movement, right? So I see a lot of conversations and fights that it seems like we've already won, that sort of we're pushing back on now. So to give an example, I see a lot of women saying, I shouldn't work outside of the house, or a man should do this and a man should do that. Or I see a lot of men saying, women have to serve their man, or women, a man is entitled to cheat on someone he's in a relationship with. And so it's really troubling and concerning, because I think people are looking for leaders. People are searching for those who they can follow. And some of the folks that are online some people it doesn't appear that they have a lot of ethics to what they do. They're just talking from their own experiences, and those experiences can cause other people to believe certain things that affect their relationships that are offline. And so I've been concerned for quite some time, not only about how it's been impacting Black men, but also how it's been impacting people overall. There have been a lot of conversations in the broader community about the show Adolescence, and how conversations about the manosphere have impacted young boys. And so I wanted to have this particular conversation to discuss the ways in which Black online spaces are different or similar, and what we can do to really talk about it, and what role models we can provide here. So I just want to start with you, Michael. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in online spaces as they relate to masculinity and hyper-masculinity?
Some of the things that I've seen, there's a lot of dating challenges, or 20 versus 1, or pop the balloon, and a lot of podcasting talking about, or speaking about how you should behave as in a relationship or in the world. A lot of these people don't necessarily, how do I say this in the right way? Don't necessarily, I don't think a lot of these people spend a lot of time studying human interaction historically, or even just Black history sometimes. And no shade, just not throwing shade, but I just don't know if a lot of those people have spent time really trying to understand what it is to be a man or a male or a human throughout a period of time. And what concerns me the most is that they have an audience. They have an audience of people because it sounds good, because when you hear it like a little soundbite, it's like, oh, that's great. I can use that in use it to motivate myself. And what's really provocative about it is they're very confident. And if I'm a younger man who is trying to figure out who I am and trying to navigate this world, they're confident. They seem to have what I don't have, which is whether money, wealth, women. I'm going to follow these groups or individuals. And so to me, there's this disturbing trend of individuals who may or may not be qualified speaking about things with such confidence and having this following. And that's pretty disturbing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else have thoughts on that? About what trends you're seeing?
Yeah, one of the trends that, and it's a disturbing trend, but one of the trends that I see is people being super selfish. And, you know, a lot of the relationship experts, if you can even use the term experts, a lot of times, you know, there's this sort of uptick in rhetoric that says, you know, don't do that and don't go there, and if they ask for this, just, you know, kick them out the door, just like all these things that I'm like, I don't think that's the essence of who we are as people, right? Like we, you know, we're the influencers that remind us to be gracious. We're the influencers that remind us to, you know, consider, you know, or rather to be empathetic, to consider what another person is going through. And I think you can see the exact opposite happening in a lot of male-dominated online spaces, and particularly for people of color and for Black men, that is hard for me to witness quietly because I believe that, you know, in order to build stronger relationships, we do have to empathize, we do have to see our partners, we do have to, you know, care about people. And so I think that big trend of just not caring about anybody, getting it how you can get it, fit in where you fit in, like, you know, forget them. I think that's something that is a trend, and it's one that I wish would go away very quickly.
Yeah, I definitely would like to piggyback off of that. I feel as though like we learned a lot of things from the rhetoric that we used to use in the 90s, like smell blood in the water, go get it, and all this other stuff. I feel as though like in this day and age, we live in a society where things move very fast, so it feels like everybody's looking for a finished product. It feels like people want to skip the work part or don't look at the work, the stories that it took to get where people are right now. They want to skip past that part and just get to the part where everything is nice and shiny. I think even us sitting at this platform and saying what we do for a living skips everything that we all the work that we put in to get where we are today. And I feel as though like young people see this on these social platforms and they're like, I want to have this already. Instead of looking at what it takes to be, you know, a Black man or a Black or any type of person. I feel as though like we live in an era where we cherry pick the things that we like and we discard the things that don't, that kind of make it seem like we can't achieve those things or it's going to put in a little bit extra work. I think one of the things that I'm really seeing is that it feels like it's been an agenda for a long time to break up Black bonds, like break up Black families, break up Black unions, just break up like, just you know, communities build people. And I feel as though we, in this platform that I'm seeing, it's a lot of like putting different people against each other, even Black men against other Black men. And I feel as though because we live in a society where we're always trying to prove that we're worthy of this, of any type of platform or worthy of being noticed, I think this is how we kind of got to this space where we are.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to jump in really quickly because I think everybody's hitting on like a major point here, and I feel like whenever I'm on the show, the viewers will know that I'm like, it all relates back to capitalism. And that's what I'm hearing. The discussions of, well, if it doesn't work for me, I don't have to do it, I can discard you. That's a capitalist rhetoric and ideology. You know, the discussions that I've seen, particularly with the rise of, you know, podcasters like Kevin Samuels, who was, you know, one of the like foremost Black podcasters or relationship experts, would often couch his advice, and I use that loosely, in terms of whether someone was a high value woman or a high value man. And so I think a lot of what you're saying, Sam, is related to this idea that we're just, kids are exposed to so much, and in particular, they are exposed to so much wealth, vast amounts of it, through social media. I look and as I'm scrolling and I'm seeing the huge mansions that people are living in and the lavish birthday parties that celebrities are throwing for their kids, and it just seems to be wasting money. And you're not talking about how people got that way, but it also changes your relationship to other people in your own community, because it then becomes, it's not just about myself, or excuse me, it's not about my community. It's about what I can do for my individual family and forget everybody else. And so I think there's a lot there that we could tease out about how it changes our relationship to one another.
So I always find this interesting. The internet was created to help build communities and exchange information. And in so many ways, it's almost done the opposite and harmed, like, as broken up communities, or almost made communities. So there's two trends. They've made it so people can have opposing views and then go into their own silos and camps and just stay there entrenched. And there's no interaction, or very little interaction, very hostile interaction. And I think, once again, when the internet was being, perfilated or created, I think no one really thought that would necessarily happen, or the extremes would happen. And I always think, and I'm starting to think, is there a way? What was it like pre-internet? I remember, I remember dial-up. So I just got as a kid, I got the tail end of pre-internet, and I wonder, how did we relate to each other prior to that? I know these communities existed, so to speak, in person, and the extremes existed prior to this. But were we a little more moldable? Were we a little more able to hear other people?
I think social media gave us a platform to compare ourselves to bigger personalities. I think it's funny to think that humanity or the human element touched social media, but it really did, right? I feel as though, like, humans, by our very nature, we have a tendency to try to hold other people down, or try to think like if we're not the bottom, we feel better about ourselves. So essentially, the oppressed always becomes the oppressor, right? And I feel like, again, I usually always say this, like, social media is a place of sad people with happy pictures. We see these facades and we say, this is what I want to emulate, this is what I want to be. And in all reality, it's essentially not that. I feel like growing up I don't want to age myself, but growing up pre-internet, the pool size that I had of what a black man was very small. Very small. It was either family members, teachers, or pastors. It wasn't really a big pool of examples that I had to, to pull from. And I feel like now, if I say the most outrageous thing, I have a following. And now I am the example that I may not even believe the stuff that I'm saying, but because I want you to follow me because it's lucrative, like you said, capitalism, I am now the example of what a black man or what a man is in your view. And I feel like that's the difference between what was pre-internet and what is now.
Yeah.
I think you just hit on something really big, though, about it being lucrative, right? There was a period of time when, all these platforms did not exist, and a period of time where we were using the internet, for school and, whatever more business-related things, but, and socially as well, but, like, there weren't a bunch of people that you knew were millionaires from it, right? And I don't know even the numbers today, because I believe that they're probably not accurate. You know what I mean? The ones that you sort of look at, seems like everybody is an influencer and making millions of dollars, and obviously that cannot be true. But we do know now that people are making a living or making extra cash on the side being big personalities. And to your point, when we attach that to money and resources, the authenticity goes out the window.
Oh, for sure.
I heard this interesting quote. They said, so essentially Facebook is to lie to people you do know, and Twitter's a place where you tell the truth to people you don't know. And I think there's other platforms, Instagram, Threads, a bunch of them, that you could probably use that analogy for. But I think going back to your influencer comment, that is now once again, profession. That is what people aspire to be.
Yeah.
And I hope, I'd like to be an optimistic person and think that can lead us down good paths. But there's a lot of examples of influencers doing a lot of things immorally, harming other people, harming themselves, and going down a route that wouldn't be necessarily a good example for the next generation.
And to be clear, the structures that produced influencers, because we can't let these companies off the hook, right? Many of these companies, Meta in particular, knew of the harms that their social media platforms were causing, particularly to young teenage girls and their own self-image. They had this awareness and they had this knowledge, and instead of choosing to pull back on some of those elements to preserve the self-esteem of young girls, they actually promoted those efforts and made it worse. And so it has been, in a lot of ways, there are so many benefits to social media. It's nice to stay connected with people you may not otherwise be living in the same town with, but maybe you went to college with them, and it's nice to be informed about things and events that are going on. And it certainly has opened up particular worlds, for myself included. But I also am very, very concerned overall about how it's influenced my own self-image, how it's influenced my relationship to the environment, because you're just told to buy. And every other post on social media is about how they can get you to buy. Your attention is totally captivated by that. And then the short clips where people are just saying whatever because it's effective for them, and you can't trust what they're saying. But I want to get back to the topic. So I'm gonna ask you, Michael, can you kind of explain the manosphere, and can you explain how that is manifested or is not manifested in Black online spaces?
I will do my best here. And the best explanation I can go with is like I won't say best part, but there's a spectrum. There's one spectrum where they're talking about men's rights and how men are treated in certain arenas in America and the world, right? And then the other one is this perspective that can be very anti-feminist, can be very homophobic, it can be very can be super capitalist, can be also alt-right as well. So there's this huge spectrum, and there are a lot of things that go in there. There's like passport bros that go in there. There are different, sometimes there's Christian nationalism that somehow goes in there. Motivational speeches that somehow go in there. There's a lot of ways you can actually enter this sphere. That not knowing it, you start listening to one person, and then slowly but surely the algorithm picks you up, and you start. Best gateway I would say is sometimes they start with like Joe Rogan, and then all of a sudden you're getting all of his associates or guests, and slowly but surely you're getting wrapped up in this like sphere of influence of these different individuals. And that's the best way I can describe it. There are better YouTube videos that explain and go a little more detail of the differences and how people can get wrapped up in it. But it is a very I want to say disturbing trend, because you can get wrapped up in it and not necessarily know. And you could be truly just trying to improve your life, like going to the gym, and then just start listening to certain podcasts and slowly just shift your views on women or what men should or should not be, very slowly.
So that's for like the general manosphere as it's been termed, but is that the same for Black online spaces?
I think the manosphere has Black, there is a part of that is Black, right? I would put Kevin Samuels in there as well. It is bigger. I would say it's wider. It affects all Americans, but definitely there are Black spaces within it for sure.
And then there's also a space where you're longing to situate your identity, in particular as a Black person that cares about other Black people. and through that, it can become very segmented and very gendered. Can become about, Dr. Umar is an example of that, right? Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is great. I would consider myself one in very specific ways, but a lot of his rhetoric, his interest in having multiple wives and having multiple girlfriends, a lot of his particularized homophobia. You can be looking to, you can be knowledgeable about Black history and care about Black people, but also still be wrapped up in these discussions that are, harmful to members of our community, and that sort of result in real harm for people. So anyone else have thoughts about the manosphere generally and how you've seen that play out in online spaces?
Yeah, so I'll just say that, back in the day, right, before social media, and certainly the way that it's proliferated through all that we do today, you had to have a certain amount of credibility to, for your voice to mean something in a community, and so you got pastors and you have, other faith leaders and coaches and, music teachers and these people that are giving you advice based upon their long-term experience generally. And I think, we sort of pinpointed now that the people at the top don't necessarily have those skills. And we're not, when we go on and sort of superficially search for someone whose ideas sort of match up with ours, we're not screening them or making sure that we're following ideas or people who embody our values. And so it is, to Michael's point earlier, like anybody is giving you these ideas, and the only reason that they have a platform is because they are popular on social media. And they are popular on social media for any number of reasons, but they don't have to do, most times, with their, the amount of knowledge that they gain in the subject, or the amount of studies that they've done, or the amount of people that they have talked to. You can write your own credentials so long as you have an audience, right? And so I think that plays into, that's relevant, because back in the day, there were people that people who knew me and loved and cared about me could say, hey, you need to go talk to Pastor such and such, or you need to go hang out with, Dr. blah, 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 blah for a day, or shadow them or whatever, which should still be going on. But I think it's just a healthy reminder that we cannot turn over, sort of raising kids, mentoring kids, and like we can't turn that over to social media and online spaces. And so it forces us to remind ourselves, and I literally remind myself when I am on social media. Sometimes I'm like, get out the house, like stop what you're doing right now, leave, go. You're looking up, ChatGPT and Google and whatever else, like literally pick up the phone and talk to somebody who's been doing these things, and you're gonna yield better results in that way. So I guess it's just a moment to sort of wish that we could go back to the old days. And I did not know that in my life I would be here so soon, like back in my day, but here I am.
Yeah.
I think, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think you touched on a very good point. I think one of the things that we've lost, I'm not going to say we've lost it, because I'm pretty sure in our professions we've incorporated, which is the mentorship, right? I feel like as a community we've kind of drifted away from mentorship, and now by de facto these personalities are our younger generation's mentors. Growing up, we have two hands. We all look for their hands to hold in the dark, right? One of the hands is for community, the other one is for partnership. And I feel like the one that we had for community now has a phone in it. And this is the one that is now guiding us. The way the algorithms work is that people who wrote algorithms are very smart. They knew that it's two emotions that you can get people to react on. That's anger and sadness, right? Or fear. And they use these algorithms to put this content in people's faces, essentially, and say, I'm going to trigger something, and you're going to fall into a hole because of it, and I may be able to market something to you because of through this process. And I feel like because of this, people like our pastors or just our religious leaders in the community no longer have that platform, or no longer have they have the credibility, but not in the social age, because they don't have 100 viewers, or they don't have the followers, or all these things. And because we have these de facto, personalities that are profiting from saying things that they might not actually believe in, the mentors that generally you would have in the community are no longer have the voice.
Yeah, I want to jump in just a little bit, because I agree with both of you on what you've shared, and talking about some of the historical differences. But I also don't want to romanticize previous generations either, because as we all know, there were many issues with how Black men and Black women, or women identifying people, related to each other, and particularly leadership roles, right? But I also think you're hitting on something that's really interesting, and I think it also takes us back to some of the discussions about racialized capitalism. I mean, there are some pastors who are on social media, but they're also being seduced by, being able to tap into certain financial, opportunities. And so I think that's also impacting us when you transparently can see that some of the pastors who are online are selling you things, or are making money off of particularized parts of their work, and that being legitimized as okay. It sort of brings them down in the eyes of the general public, and puts them more on par with the Kevin Samuels or the Dr. Umars or other people, or relationship experts who really just have the podcast mic and that's their credential. I don't want to get too much into romanticizing things, but I'm grateful for this discussion, because it can really hit home on some of what we're seeing. I think for me, I think there's a lot of fear that Black women have right now. Fear about their relationships, or their ability to connect their whole selves to another person, because of some of the problems that we're discussing. So I know some of my friends tell me about the dating world, and they'll have men that'll come up to them and say, well, if I'm going to take you to dinner, you need to have sex with me, and just be that frank with it, and or we'll just say things about, well, I need the woman to be in the house, and that's the first thing they say, and that's quite frankly even worse than some of the generations where women were expected to be in the house. Some people are saying things like that, and so there are a lot of women that feel, I can't bring my whole self, the experiences that I have, the knowledge that I've gained, to these relationships, because some people are so anxious about their position and their place that they're taking it out on me, right? Because if you have some economic anxiety, financial anxiety, because you're constantly exposed to such vast amounts of wealth, and you don't have that, sometimes you can take that out on the people closest to you. So yeah, I'm interested to hear some of your thoughts about that, about how this plays out in the dating world.
Yeah, I think you definitely brought up a good point. I think romanticizing the past is very, it's a touchy thing, because every generation has their own trauma. I think you're absolutely right. I come from a family who was, I have 3 little sisters, and these are things that I think about, right? I think about, how, men do approach them, how they're gonna, treat them when they don't hear something that they like, and things like that. I think it's honestly like I don't know how to say it. Like, it is scary. It's very scary because not only are women scared of men, but men are also scared of other men. I have personally experienced it with like friends, just having general banter and things like that. And I feel like the way that social media is, again, is our de facto teacher. I generally think that men are getting examples of what works from other men who are in different financial situations, so they feel entitled to certain things. And again, I feel as though like capitalism has changed the way that we date. I also feel as though like because we're using social media to now date, the things that people interact and say to each other are now different. I'll just say I agree. I agree.
There's a lot there, right?
There is.
I think, so when I think about this, I think about, okay, as you're growing up as a young man, young person, you're trying to figure out who you are. And there's a lot of influences. There's your culture, the American culture, the Black American culture. There's your religion or your spirituality. There's your friends. There's social media. There are so many things to listen to. When we were growing up, there were still a lot of things to listen to, but now there's even more noise, potentially noise and/or things that you're experiencing. There's an example I like to use when I think about growing in like the different cultures in America. There's this book called Omnivore's Dilemma, and in the book they talk about how the American plate or American table has never had one cuisine or culture take over. It's always been a mixture. And I like to think that is sort of culturally all the influences that we experience living here. Like, do we listen to our grandfather's generation and how they view women and values and culture? Do I listen to this person I heard online? Do I listen to this book that I just read from a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Like, who do I listen to? Or do I listen to my best friend? Do I listen to my dad? Everyone has these different experiences, and as a young man, or I'm not young anymore, but as a man, I can see it being very difficult to figure out what should I listen to, and who will lead me down the right path, and who I should be, and how I should treat women, and how I should date. It's just so many influences, and I don't necessarily have an answer. I will say this: I think, I have a father and a stepfather that were in my life, and I think I got a lot of my influence from them. And I was fortunate to have two men that I interacted with that were my fathers. And that, I look back at that and I go, very grateful and happy to have them both. Because, I'm 10 years old, I see them go to work, see them come back. I see them show love to my mom and do things. And both of them are very different in how they showed love, but they showed love in their own ways. And I look back at that and I go, and I started to imitate that as I got older, and I realized that had a profound effect on me. And, I meet other Black men like myself who don't have that, who don't have not just a father, but a father figure to imitate that, to understand, to trying to take that in. And it's concerning to me. It's really concerning to me, and it's hard. It is very hard. It's very hard for our community right now.
So it sounds like so I'll point out that, there were a lot of, and I think you made this point earlier, that in the 1990s, 1980s, you could find examples of men and Black men who were making, or giving commentary about relationships that probably would not align with what your views are now, and maybe more align with passport bros or whatever they call them. So there were those images and voices at the time, but it sounds like social media is harder to get through. You know what I mean? It sounds like young people today, young men today, will value the voices from social media more than maybe people in our generation. And it's just, to me, that means the question then is why? You know what I mean? Like, why is it so hard to say, hey, young person, this is just an equivalent to TV back in the day? You know what I mean? It is not real. This is entertainment purposes only, why is it so difficult to do that? And why don't we have, people, and maybe they are, but, jumping up and down and just saying like, this is fake, it's not real, don't do it,
And it has real consequences for people. I mean, if you're seeing yourself struggling, and then you're seeing these people, living, luxurious lives and traveling and doing all of these amazing things, and you're just so intimately exposed to that, then it creates a lot of anxiety in your own life.
Maybe though, and this is what made me think about it, because I used to look up to Biggie that way. You know what I mean? Like, I was a kid in Tallahassee, Florida, had never been to Brooklyn, New York, none of it, but I could tell you all about his life and, who he was hanging out with. I wanted to be this man, you know what I mean? And so, I don't know, like, it wasn't anxiety, it was just a dream at that point. It was all a dream.
I feel as though, like, kids today now, it's an accessibility issue, right? Instead of having one Biggie, they have 17.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if there's something to that.
Yeah.
And they're following that Biggie every day. They're seeing every time he thinks.
Every piece of his life.
There was a removal, there was a mystery on what Biggie and Tupac were necessarily doing.
You saw the videos, but
we saw the videos. We didn't know exactly what he was thinking of doing every time.
Yeah, I mean, once you turn the TV off, the TV didn't come with you. Like, once you step out the house, TV stayed there, you're out the house, maybe you'll see another TV at somebody else's house. This one, you're in the shower with the TV. I mean, you're everywhere with it. And I think you bring up a good point. There has always been rhetoric.
Always.
Always. I think the difference is now is that the rhetoric looks like it's winning. Like, I'm seeing it have a life that I want, and I'm struggling, and I don't have. And I think it's the appearance of success that's making me want what they have or behave. If you tell me, oh, this is the way that you become a millionaire. I mean, we've seen this in the 90s. They sold books. This is how you become a millionaire. People are still not millionaires, right? But it's the illusion of, if I do these things, I could become this or wealthy or whatever the case may be. And I feel like they have this all the time with 17 people doing it, so it has to be real.
And
17 people said it.
Yeah, and I'm just like piggybacking on what you're saying, like, and in 30-second clips. You know what I mean? It's not like a think piece. It's not a book that you have to get through.
That dopamine hit just enough, and you move on.
It's just like you scroll down and you see some bullet points, and you're like, I need to email everybody in my network, and I'm going to be a millionaire. So I think it's a very, very simple message, and I guess that is, part and parcel with being a social media influencer. You got to get attention, keep their attention span, and so that means you have to give these big themes, this big part of your personality and your character in small 15, 30-second clips. And I think that is probably primed to create confusion for particularly young people watching.
For sure. I remember I saw this this clip, and it was one social media personality in particular. I don't know his name, but he was basically saying how dating a woman who has children is a no-go. Like, you shouldn't do it. Essentially calling them damaged goods, which was crazy.
Yeah.
Only to find out that he is in fact married to a woman who had a prior child before he met him. So even his message that he's portraying to the community is not real. He obviously does not believe that this is a real thing. But it doesn't matter what the truth is, because he's already put the message out there.
Yeah.
People have already gobbled it up and say, I can't live like this. Even though the messenger is saying that you essentially can live like this.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting, like, because how we are relating to each other, it's about what you can do for me rather
Very
than
transactional.
About how I relate to you as another human being. I think about Pop the Balloon, and I think the YouTube series where it's a dating show and people are lined up, and then one person comes out, and maybe even before they utter two words, people are popping their balloon to indicate that they don't want to pursue this person, right? And it's completely based upon like very, very generic things, like maybe what they look like, what their shoes are, just very, very generic things. And our relationship to people, because of social media, maybe because of online dating, it's all about getting the connection as quickly as possible, but not necessarily doing the work to actually get to know that person as a person. And I think about that in relation to our own political sphere. I think about that in the context that we are living in right now, with this president who has made it okay to say it's fine not to care about the human beings that are right next to you, because if they're not in your family, if they're not some arbitrary thing of if they're not a citizen, then it's okay for them to be treated horribly, right? It's okay that Black and brown people are having horrible things happening to them because it's not happening to you, and you can still be a good person because you care about your family and you're doing what you're individually supposed to do. So it's fine for you not to care about them. And all of this is changing our relationship to people. The 30-second idea of, like, you're watching this 30-second clip, or you're scrolling through an online dating profile and you literally spend 2 seconds on it before you click off of it. It's changing what responsibilities we owe to fellow human beings.
One thing I just thought about, what the internet, and I would say social media, a lot of things have changed. Delayed gratification has, it's something that I don't think, I think we're slowly losing. Whereas, I'll give you an example. I remember buying things online. It would take a week, 2 weeks, months to come to me. Now I'm like, hey, Amazon, it won't come to me next day.
Same day. Look, same day.
We're gonna have problems. And I think about relationships. People think immediately I gotta be gratified. And relationships, if you're building a relationship with someone, it's gonna be, you want it to be of quality and it's endures. There's gonna be some rough times. There's gonna be some things you're gonna have to endure.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna be always good, And I think, going back to all this technology, social media, everything, delayed gratification, even success, going to success. To get to whether it's monetary success or success in a field, you have to endure a lot.
Mm-hmm.
10 years plus, 20 years plus, whatever field. I'm not even talking about just monetary. And then you see online, hey, all I gotta do is X, Y, and Z and I can get that success. And they, to believe that's even true, it just is this whole illusion that they're casting on all of us.
Well, so, and I think this is getting us to a different area in the conversation, because to that point, there's almost this idea that you are either a good person or a bad person, or you're doing well or you're doing terribly, or you're right or you're wrong, you know what I mean? And think about it, that's how Pop the Balloon can even work, right? If people are popping balloons straight out the gate, without having a full understanding of the person, what you like to eat, do you like to cook, you know what I mean? Literally just understanding whether you vibe with a person. People aren't even doing that anymore, but it is because it is easy for us to use this binary of good versus bad, yes versus no. I either like this person or I don't like this person. And we cannot exist in that way as a people. Our relationships cannot be built upon that alone, right? And it also assumes that you can't grow and become different and learn. And I always look at it this way too. There's a lot of people who are successful one day and, 3 years later, successful, whatever that means. But, 3 years later, fall upon hard times just like anyone else, right? So I don't take for granted that where anyone is where they're going to end up, right? And so that's my concern with some of those dating shows, is it reinforces this idea that this person can be good or can be bad. And I just disagree with that as a way of valuing who human beings are.
I actually want to add to that. I feel as though, I want to add to what both of you actually said. I think in addition to that, when you skip these steps, it also doesn't teach people how to emotionally regulate themselves. Soon as something's inconvenience, they want to act out on it. There's no processing okay, let me process what's going on. No. Kevin Samuels didn't process. It was split seconds. I got to do it like this. Or, Beyonce and Jay-Z, they're not going through this. That means I can't go through it. And that's the thing, comparison is always the killer of joy, right? It will always be. We like you said, it's a yes, no,
Well,
good,
high value
bad,
versus
high value
yeah.
versus whatever the other person is, you know, because we breathe different airs, apparently, because we're high, whatever. But, you know, I feel as though it really does take away from the emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Like, young adults do not know how to sit there, take these puzzles that we have, and take time to put them together, right? Everybody over here has some type of experience in getting to where they want to get, whether it be a lawyer, doctor, you know, engineer, whatever. It wasn't in a day. It was a lot of hot coal we walked on, a lot of tears, a lot of, you know, self-doubt. And I feel like in social media, because we only see the finished product, we never see the trials and tribulations. Everything, if you go through trials and tribulations in a relationship or in a career, then you're doing it wrong. But in all reality, I mean, everybody has been through their trials and tribulations. And I feel as though, like you said, because we have now polarized these two options, and there are only two options, there's no gray area, it's only yes or no, black or white, whatever, it doesn't allow us to actually figure out how to navigate life correctly, or somewhat of correct semblance. You know?
Yeah. There's a lot that I'm thinking, and there's a lot of questions that I can ask. But I want to move us to thinking, like, well, what can we do about this, right? With the knowledge of what we have of, you know, how people are being influenced online, how young people are being manipulated, how, you know, there's been some lack of progress in related to gender relations and relationships with queer folks. There's been some stagnation there. Like, what can we do about this? And I'm going to sort of turn to Michael, because one of the things that I love about him is that, unlike myself, Michael is very willing to engage with people who are different than him or share different beliefs, and I think that's a really great quality. But why don't you tell them about one of the experiences that you've had with a younger person who was influenced by some of these online spaces?
So the previous job I had, I became friends with a younger gentleman in his, I want to say, early 20s. Just got out of, he decided to skip college and just was working. And I noticed, you know, big fan of Kevin Samuels, big fan of some people similar to that. And he had a particular way of looking at women that wasn't positive, I'll say that. And I would always try to understand why, you know, he loved his mom, he would date women, you know, but it was just like, he sort of almost had this hatred towards women. And subsequently we had deeper conversations, and he revealed to me in a later conversation that there was some abuse that happened to him when he was younger. And he never really processed it. And because he's working a minimum wage job, he didn't get mental health for it. And I encouraged him to do that. You know, I try to, you know, take on as much as I can, but once again, I'm not a licensed therapist. I don't know how I can help someone with that. I'm like, hey, you really need to talk to someone. And I really encouraged him. Unfortunately, our relationship ended before I got to see where he is. I hope he's doing well. But he internalized this thing that happened to him and sort of expelled it on black women that he met and had interacted with. And unfortunately wouldn't be the first person that I've met or have contact with that's happened to, or that, you know, that's going through that. And it's one thing, I guess, saying what can we do. One of the things I would encourage everyone, especially black men, black women, mental health is very important. Seeing someone, talking to someone, we go through a lot of traumas. There's traumas passed down to us that we don't even realize. I would highly encourage, you know, even before you maybe even start dating somebody, just start talking to someone about the things you're going through mentally and the things you've gone through. I just think that's super important.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight something about that, because obviously I've heard that story before, and one of the things that you didn't share is that before he asked about therapy, you first shared that you have gone to therapy.
Yes.
And that was something that by you being vulnerable with him, it allowed him to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
It allowed him to see a different model of what things can be.
Absolutely.
And so you didn't judge him. You tried not to.
No.
You just shared alternate opinions. And you gave him the space to share his truth. And I think that's so critical, and it's so difficult. I mean, I think particularly if you are a person whose identity is the object of some of that hatred, it's very, very difficult to do that. So it takes a lot from us. But what we're talking about here is so much about mentorship, so much about our relation to our communities. And so I want to hear, some closing thoughts about what you all think about the importance of doing that.
So my closing thought is a question.
Yeah.
Do y'all, all of y'all, do you think that there is good from social media in Black spaces and the sort of online, the way that young Black and brown people can use social media? Is there good? And I say that with the context that I recently had a kid. Y'all know that. And, I think we oftentimes are looking outward for someone who's going through something that we've been through. We're looking for someone who we can look up to their experience and take some cues from there. And I certainly found myself doing that, becoming a father, wanting to make sure I was going to do this right or support my wife in the appropriate way, or, to do whatever. And so I did find some of that in some of these spaces that we've talked about. And a lot of people sort of saying like, hey, it's all good. You got this, whatever. So A, I'm pointing out that there are some good spaces out there. B, I wonder if there's an issue in finding them, or there's not enough, or what the issue may be, because there are certainly some very stark differences from some of those spaces and some of the ones that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with wholeheartedly what you said. I have on my Instagram, I have you could create like little things, like classifications. I have one called motivation. And it's a lot of people speaking positive about like just different things that has helped me personally, that has given me resources for like therapy and things like that. So the internet is not evil. It's not we make it evil, but it's not evil. Like there is good on the internet. I think my closing statement would be, our dollars matter, and if we don't fund what they're trying to do, they can't do what they're trying to do to us, period. So that's what I think. So.
Yeah, I think both points are so important. Those spaces are out there, but it also requires some vulnerability from all of us to share our experiences, to not fear youth, to not fear young Black children, to really listen to them and not dismiss it out of hand, which I think sometimes some of the statements I feel like this is ridiculous, but then it's really, really important to really hear people out. And as I get older, that's more of what I'm thinking about and what I'm trying to do. So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, traveling too, going outside of where you live, going outside the country, I think everyone would say you change perspectives. Even, for example, I was just out of the country. I just went to Japan a couple weeks ago, and I went on a school trip, and this gentleman was presenting the business that he was running, and he talked about how he took his wife's last name, and I've never heard that in that culture, and then he explained why, and it's because he's the second son and he was marrying into a different family, and he needed to take that, basically onto that mantle, or sort of take that on. And I thought to myself, just the rules of masculinity in America, you would not do that. But in Japan, in Japanese culture, that was totally normal, and it's done all the time. And it makes you really start to think, what else is out there? Like, how else are people defining masculinity in other cultures, or just different ways?
Yeah, and I want to thank you all for coming today and being open to the conversation. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for another episode of Just Nation. I am so sorry, ladies. These men are not single, so please, don't inquire. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have another great conversation for you next time. So thank you so much here at Just Nation. Have a good day.